Hello and good evening, I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad, Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This. Tonight we're going to be looking at technical education and vocational training, or better known as TVET. Now 60% of jobs expected to be created under the 11th Malaysia Plan will require technical and vocational skills. Now to fill these jobs, the government is aiming to increase TVET student enrollment and promote TVET not just as another option, but to make students have it as their main choice and career choice. Now, joining us on the show to discuss this further, we have Dato Sri Ganes, who is the Vice President of International Vocational Training Association, or better known as IVETA. IVETA is a global network of vocational educators. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Pleasure's mine. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess to set the scene, let's begin with perhaps a little bit of your clarification as to what TVET constitutes here in Malaysia. What exactly does technical education and vocational training constitute?
Well, before we go to the Malaysian side of it, I think globally TVET is known as the vocational training, education, and I would say involves, some countries call it trade skills and so on. In Malaysia, it's more inclined towards vocational. Okay, because the bigger segment of it are in vocational programs itself.
What's the difference?
Vocational, by the term of vocational itself, it's called the vocation skills. That means it goes back to the occupational skills and so on. As for trainings and education where how you imply certain skill set in your academic studies, whereas training means upskilling. So basically this covers the vocational education and training, or I would say training, vocational education and technical trainings and so on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, can you give us a sense of what's actually out there, names of institutions that we might be familiar with?
All right.
Could you name a few that constitute the vocational institutes?
In Malaysia, it's a little unique, but we have different agencies championing the skills programs. Okay, I would say under the Ministry of Education, you have the polytechnics, you have the programs run with, we call it a KV school, College Vocational. And then as for Ministry of Human Resources, we have the Pusat Bertauliah, where we call accredited centers for skills, and then we have the industrial training centers, which we call ILPs, and we have under the sports ministry we have the IKBNs, right? And the other segment would be Ministry of Works. They have their own vocational certification. Same goes to the Agriculture Ministry as well.
That sounds very fragmented to me. That feels like there's so many different silos working on the same thing. First of all, why is that? And do you see a problem with the fact that it's fragmented?
Yes, you have issue of cross-platform accreditation. If you are not inclined to Ministry of Human Resources, then you have certain skills program which accredited by Education Ministry. Then you have a cross-platform issue on articulations and so on. We have been addressing this for some time. We are in the process of rectifying it. Good people in the government office are looking at it. But the issue is that every ministry have their own requirements of certain skill sets and so on. They want to roll this out as soon as possible so that they need to accommodate the requirement of the ministry itself. So put the articulation aside, they want things to move on as soon as possible to cater for the demand. Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, each of these different stakeholders, the ministries, have their own skills development program, and that falls under TVET.
Skills development and skill certification programs as well.
I see, okay.
Yeah, what about the schools in general? I mean, in some countries, kids are taught, sometimes it's gendered. Boys go and do carpentry and girls do domestic sciences.
Right.
Would that come under the kind of vocational skills training within the mainstream education curriculum?
In Malaysia, you mean?
Yeah.
All right. You see, in Malaysia, it's a bit different. It's the perception of skills itself or vocational itself, it's in a different perspective, you see. So if you were to see it, the skill has its own pathway, but it can be articulated towards the academic side as well. For instance, the entry-level skills, you need to know basic skill sets of craftsmanship and so on for you to go into certain verticals, right? So encouraging them to go into skills in schools actually gives them the encouragement or give them the path towards identifying their niche before they step into the skill sets world. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a discussion out in Singapore about this idea of the degree premium. And this is why a lot of parents are pushing their kids to get a degree rather than go to vocational schools, because they think that with a university degree, whatever the quality of that university may be, you get a bump in salary, right? This is how people think. Is there such a perception here that it's better to invest in a general degree than have your kid go to a skills-based program?
You see, we all know this. I think academic degrees are basically for our knowledge. For us to survive in this challenging world and so on, you need to have at least a basic degree for you to go into surviving in this era. But you see, countries like Singapore and India, they have formulated the programs very well, whereby they don't have to have a separate entity called vocational training and so on.
Oh.
Right? Whereby, you see, most of their academic programs are hands-on, right? So with their degree, they can able to play both sides. You know, they can be a good craftsman, they can also be a good academic performing graduate as well. So it all depends on how you formulate the entire system. Like in Germany, you can actually have a pathway, you can do both, or you can come into an apprenticeship program which you can probably go into 2 verticals at the same time and complete a program, right? So if you understand TVET, the entry level will be doing the job hands-on itself, you know, to understand how to get things done. Then you go towards supervisory level, managing those who have that skills. Then you go into managerial level to manage the entire ecosystem of putting things forward for industry. Like for instance, if you take the supply chain or logistic industry, you got to have somebody really on the ground doing the actual paperwork for port clearance and so on. Then you need to have people to understand the financing, the budgets and financial part of it. And then you need to have the people to understand the business dynamics. So different level of maturity when it comes to this business, you see. So having different skill sets is going to push you further, right, to do your business well. So it's nothing wrong to have a general degree, but you need to have a general degree with a professional certification as well. So you know what you're doing. You go out there, you perform first, then you become master of those skills that you want to put forward.
All right, we're going to continue this conversation, particularly on the policy successes that you've noticed from other countries. We're going to continue shortly on Consider This. Don't go anywhere.